Alright, so I do not have a fiberglass handle that I can use. I'm looking around, and I'm just not seeing anything I can use. So unfortunately I'm going to end up using a ash handle that I purchased at Home Depot, or maybe it was Lowe's, it was one or the other. And it's a Trooper, Ames True Temper ash handle. I think this was like $9. So really, it's not that bad. Unfortunately, the taper on this is a little too extreme to fit into the Stavr slot. Now I do have a 32, I believe it's a 32 millimeter opening on the Stavr. So as you can see, this taper is a little too steep. Put it in, it's extremely loose. This right here won't do me any good. So what I've done is I've marked it with a Sharpie. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this off as level as possible, and then I'll have to sand this down approximately the depth of the shaft column here, and then trim this, shave this down so that it fits in there nice and snug. You don't want it loose, because the looser this is, obviously the less control you're going to have of your actual scoop, and the better chance you have of breaking off your wooden shaft. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll get back to you. Alright, so today we finished up mounting the this sand scoop here to a shaft. This is the True Temper ash shaft. There's a lot of debate on the best way to get grip on the shaft itself. I don't know if you can see that, but see how shiny that is? Well, let me tell you something. Everybody says, oh, go ahead and put a paraffin wax on there, just melt it into the wood. Well, unless you sand this down, that doesn't do you any good. The reason for that is this is coated in a polyurethane, and until this finishes off, that wax basically sits on that polyurethane and does nothing for you. It just rubs off on your hands. If you have that sticky wax on your hands when you're done using this after you've waxed it the first couple of times out in the water, it's because it hasn't penetrated into the wood. You're just wiping that wax right off. If you notice that when you put the wax on and it starts running, it's probably because there's a protectant already on the wood. For example, see, this one's actually a little bit more porous. That's because this one's been roughed up. I don't know if you can see the edge right there where it's dull. That's because that's the part where it's been sanded. That is open wood, open pores. The wax will get in there. That's good. This shiny stuff, not so good. Let me show you another example. On a different scoop here, this is my T-Rex. I don't know if you can see this, but you see these little blotches? Watch this. Comes right off. Oh my goodness. What happened? That's wax. That's wax coming right off the polyurethane. This whole thing was waxed. And I took it out just to do a demonstration, and this is the result. That's because this polyurethane has prevented the wax from penetrating the wood. So make sure you have raw wood, or else the wax will not last very long. Very important. Most people don't seem to realize it's not going to go into the wood grain or into the pores of the wood with polyurethane. It's a protectant for a reason. That's what makes it slick when you take a raw, off-the-shelf shaft or handle and go out in the water with it. It's slick because of that polyurethane. There's a solution for that. If you don't want to use the wax and you don't mind spending $10, go get yourself some thick heat shrink wrapping. It's very easy to use. Slide this over your shaft, handle, whatever you want to call it, and just heat it up. It'll shrink down to the right size. Voila, you're good to go. Then you have people who say, well, that's great, but what do I do about grip? Because it's still a little slick and I've got nothing to grab onto. Use some rope. use bigger rope. The bigger the inner diameter, the ID of your heat shrink, the bigger the rope you can use, because it'll shrink down. Just make sure that your shrink rate matches the diameter of your handle. Otherwise, it's going to be loose, and what's the point? So far, the Stavrscoop is not bad. I haven't tested it yet. I'm hoping weather permits and I will be able to get it out in the field this weekend, which is in a couple of days, and give it a whirl. I will try and do a side-by-side comparison with the T-Rex. T-Rex obviously has smaller holes. This one has two different size holes, mostly the larger size. I'm not sure the specs right now. I can get those to you later on. But like I said, I'm hoping to do a side-by-side. Obviously, this one has half the material as a T-Rex, and that's not bad. That makes this one very light. Just to give you an example, this is a 5-pound scale. Width, let me go ahead and width, a little bit of the handle. Obviously the handle is anchored. You're looking at just shy of 3 pounds. Just shy of 3 pounds. Let me see if I can figure a way to do this. With the handle, we're looking at roughly, keeps wanting to slide on here. I'm going to say about 4.5 pounds with the handle. 4.5 pounds with the handle. Now remember, what did I say this was? It was just under 3 pounds. As is, with the handle, and the handle sitting on the edge. Now check this out. This is the bad boy, the T-Rex. Handle is anchored. Scoop is on the scale, and we're coming up at 4 pounds 2 ounces. 4 pounds 2 ounces. That's almost twice the weight with a handle. So my bet is the Stavrscoop, this 2.22, is going to be pretty wicked out in the field. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and I'll get back to you. Okay, I know it's kind of hard to see from a distance, but I'm actually wrapping this. I'm using hot glue and just some, like 1/8" rope to get this formed. And I'm just gluing the wood, setting the rope right into it, letting it stick for a second. And then doing the same thing, coming up, gluing the wood, popping the rope right into it, letting it stick for a minute, and then repeating the same procedure. And the reason I'm doing this particular pattern is just to give it a couple of a little bit of spacing, and then I'll start the wrap probably up in this area again. I don't know if you can see that, I'm kind of a ways away from the camera. And then what I'll do after this is the heat shrink tubing will slide over this and melt down on top of this. So, hot glue is awesome. I use it for a lot of things in this hobby, believe it or not. And hot glue gun's like $10 with glue. So now I'm going to do my last wrap and start my final wrap here. So go there, let that sit, and we'll start to twist up. Some more hot glue. Bring this one down. You don't have to glue every line, but I like to at least start it with a good solid foundation. So I'll start the first couple of wraps with glue and tightly wrap. And I don't know if you noticed, but the handle is off the table. Makes it a lot easier. I have it actually on a vise. Every few wraps, I'll add some more glue. And at the end of this, I'll go and kind of spot glue the surfaces and definitely on the ends. And again, you know, this eliminates the need for me to wax the wood. Whether you wax the wood or not, the wood will crack, it will break. It is wood, it's not metal, it's not fiberglass. Even fiberglass or carbon fiber in this situation will break, will crack. I mean, when you think about it, you're using your foot, applying pressure, and you're pulling back on the scoop, and you know, you're gonna crack it. The weakest point usually is at the neck of the scoop and where the handle meet. Obviously that depends on what kind of material you're digging into, but for me, that seems to be my weakest point. Maybe it's just because my scoop technique is aggressive or, you know, wrong. But, you know, for $10 and a handle for wood, it's a lot cheaper than buying a $20 or $30 shovel and having to cut the shovel end off just to get a fiberglass handle. Because for some reason down here they don't sell just fiberglass handles in the correct size. But we need, for scoops, that may be different for short scoops, but I'm going to go ahead and finish this off real quick. Dry, pull off these little stray hairs. Now that that's finished, I'll go through, check the ends, secure the ends a little better. Just gonna spot, glue those together. This gap here, I call the slip gap, because if my hand slips off this one, it'll catch on the second one. Now if my hand was to slip off this whole thing entirely, then chances are I won't be able to close my hand in time and I'll drop the scoop. Or, better yet, sink the scoop in the heavy waves. And that's all there is to that one. Okay, so we're going to move on. I thought of something else you can use. I happen to have drywall fiber tape for drywall seams and stuff, not being used, just sitting in my garage. I have a new house and don't need this. What I can do is I can actually take this stuff and it'll stick to itself rather well. You know, just get you a good piece. You know, this entire handle setup is strictly for demonstration, so you know, it may not be my optimal, but look, if you can see that, it sticks. pretty good. So just continue to wrap this. To a point where it's raised. Now this is the thickest part of my handle too, so whether or not this drywall will actually, the heat shrink will actually go over this is another story. Let's see. Push that down a little bit. And yeah, it's actually pretty high. It's almost as high as the rope here. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and slide this tubing gingerly. Snug fit right there, obviously, because that's the thickest part. I'm going to work this over the rope very carefully. And I've got duct tape at the end here. I'm going to see if I can get this over the duct tape. And the reason I'm going to try and do that is just because I want my shield to go as much as I can down. And look at that. Still, this is a nice long piece. It's about 4 feet. That should probably do it right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to shrink it just like it is. Shrink this down, and this here will give me a little bit more grip. You know, you can apply some stickum or whatever, but I think this should be plenty fine. So let's start that process. I'm going to use a low temperature setting on my heat gun. This is a 1500 watt heat gun. This is a little overkill. This is for automotive use. It will melt everything, so make sure all your plastics are a good distance away. If you don't mind, I'm going to start this end and work my way out towards the handle tip. So here we go. Alright, so let that cool down a little bit. It's very hot, especially on the metal and the wood. It will heat up. I'm going to put it on level 2. It's a lot hotter, should do a lot quicker, but you have to be careful because you can burn a hole in your heat shrink tubing. So let's give it a shot and see what happens. Okay, now let me show you what happens when you do too much. When you do too much, you burn a hole. But what's happening is, I forgot to take the sticker off. I don't know if you can see that. See that sticker? Well, that sticker got extremely hot and melted from the inside out. So it caused a split in that when I was heating it up over here, this started to split open. So you got to be very careful. Let me see if I can get you a little closer into the action here so you can see what happens. Here we go. With the leftover heat shrink that I took, I cut it off, I slid it down, and I went ahead and fixed that patch here. Be careful because the underlayer will melt still, so just do a quick rough of the patch, get it tight, it's good to go. It won't slide, you're on. I did trim down the end a little bit. This here might bother some people, you can fancy it up. For me, I don't ever really use my hand there, more right here on this end. But look at this. Look at that. Looks good. I mean, it feels good. Plenty of grip. Plenty of grip. I mean, perfect amount of grip. Heat shrink. Who needs hot wax? Why do you want a hot wax once every couple of times out? This will last a while, and as long as you're not going through like volcanic rock, this stuff is pretty strong. Sure, you know, water might seep in there, but it's polyurethane, so really you don't have that much to worry about. And this stuff is cheap. 4 feet, I think I got this for like $7.50 for a 4-foot section. I believe it was 1.5 inch to start with, shrinked down to I think an inch and a quarter, something like that. And we're good to go. I mean, this is solid. I'm excited. Next thing to do is going to be to take this bad boy out and test it in the sand. Test it in the sand. Okay, see you later.